9 years of scientific analysis has recently concluded that the vast majority of dungeon masters are using backstories incorrectly. And my crack team of researchers and analysts are never wrong. Okay. The truth is that many dungeon masters probably have no clue how to use backstories their players create. And then there are other dungeon masters who extract random elements from the backstories and find creative ways to cram them into the ongoing campaign. Of course, there are lots of dungeon masters who know exactly what they're doing and are doing it correctly too. I don't want to make it seem like there aren't, because there are. I'm not the only smart person in the room. I think I'm smart. I hope I'm smart. Am I smart? Anyway, using character backstories correctly is where I think we as dungeon masters often err, because I think there's a better way to use backstories. Why the DM should use character backstories. So to preface this whole discussion about using them correctly, let's just talk about why you should use your character's backstories in your D&D games to begin with. I think there's a few different reasons. And the first thing that I'll mention is something that I have definitely observed in my games, that when I bring in elements from a character backstory into the game, and then it could be an entire adventure, for instance, it could be just a small encounter, I can see on the players' faces, in their demeanor, that they are really enjoying it, that it is something special and cool for them to experience something that they wrote from their backstory becoming a part of the game because I chose to integrate it. It's just something that makes it more immersive, more enjoyable, and rewarding for players when the game master does this. Part of it is simply that the players get a kick out of seeing something that they wrote in the backstory come to life in the game. And I think the other side of it as well is possibly part of an unspoken social contract that exists between the dungeon master and the player. That is, if you take the time to write out a backstory, I, the dungeon master, will take the time to see how I can incorporate it into the ongoing game. Now, obviously, one of the primary purposes of a character backstory is to inform role-playing for that player. But I, as a dungeon master, can also use it to inform my game design. The other thing that backstories do when you bring them into the game is that it gives the player's character more motivation to do a thing. You see, we're in a role-playing game where we're supposed to be putting ourselves in the shoes of our characters and doing and saying things that our characters would do in any given situation. So when something from a character's backstory comes into the game, that gives that player more motivation to have their character roleplay a certain way and interact with that element from their backstory. And in the case of something like plot hooks, it gives your players' characters more motivation to bite that plot hook and go do that thing. I think it makes players feel as well that they have more agency and input into the game, that isn't just the dungeon master pulling all the strings. Instead, the players feel empowered, like they have a say in what's going on in the game world as well. Now, personally, as a game master, I feel that it is extremely rewarding to take something important to the players, to their characters specifically, that the players themselves made and thought about and created, and then taking it, putting it into the game, making it come to life, and then observing the players' reactions and seeing how much fun they're having with that cool little thing that we did. By the way, if you're looking for easy-to-use 5th edition Game Master resources, check out my Lairs and Legends Kickstarter live now. It will deliver 2 hardcover books. The first book, Lairs and Legends, will contain an anthology of 25 5th edition adventures spanning levels 1 to 15 and over 100 new terrifying monsters. The second book, Loot and Lore, will contain a smorgasbord of DM resources, magic items, traps, puzzles, standalone encounters, and more. And there's a digital map pack containing all the maps you'll need to play online. We're about halfway through the campaign, so time is kind of running out. Become a Lairs and Legends backer at the link below. How to use character backstories. Now, the most typical way that I have seen dungeon masters trying to integrate character backstories into their D&D games is by taking elements of the backstories and putting them into the main campaign arc. Now, the main campaign story arc is the main adventure, the big thing that's going on. If you're running the Icewind Dale module, it's all of the events that are outlined therein. If you have a thieves guild that is taking over Waterdeep, and that is going to be the adventure from levels 1 to 10 or thereabouts, that is the main campaign story arc. And dungeon masters will take things from backstories. There was this special sword that the player had growing up and they lost it. And they'll take these things and try to slip them into the main campaign story arc. So you're still running Icewind Dale, but as you run it, you kind of find things from your backstory slipped in there. Of course, the dungeon master is doing that intentionally because that's the way that works. Or you're defeating that thieves guild trying to take over Waterdeep, and all the players are finding things from their characters' backstories just conveniently slipped into the main campaign. So when we think about pulling stuff from character backstories into our games, this is the way that I feel a lot of people tend to do things. And you will get clever points for doing it, but it is impossible to do it without your players knowing that it was rigged. I don't know, for me, the way I think, it kind of seems to break immersion a little bit when something from their backstory just magically shows up in an adventure they're currently on. They will know you designed it intentionally. There's no way of getting around that. I mean, you could stretch this argument and say that they know that the entire game was designed intentionally, but I feel like this is probably a little bit more than the standard way of looking at things. If that doesn't make sense, just yell at me in the comments and say that I'm an idiot. I mean, hey, it happens. The other thing is that it can be challenging to pull this off. I mean, as the dungeon master, you're going to have to look at their backstories, and you're going to have to think of creative and interesting ways to pull all of those elements into the ongoing campaign and hopefully have it not disrupt everything, perhaps. I don't know. Or maybe disrupting it is not that big of a deal. That's up to you and your group, I suppose, to decide. But the point is it's not always the easiest exercise in the world to make that all fit together. So I submit to you that there is a better way to do this, a better way to take your players' characters' backstories and pull them into your ongoing game. And the way to do this is by creating something that I call character story arcs. So you have the main campaign story arc, the Thieves Guild or Icewind Dale, but you also have story arcs that happen off on the side, and we call those the character story arcs. And the basic idea here is that something from a character's backstory, that sword that they lost, for instance, becomes an entire adventure that the whole group goes on, because remember, we run group games around here. For instance, from my Ancient Dragon campaign, I had a player character named Krindar, and Krindar had a backstory, obviously, and from his backstory, one of the things that happened is that he was responsible for killing both of his brothers, and he is unaware of his sister's presence, life, dead, alive, he doesn't know. So in the game, his two brothers arrived as revenants, tracking him down and attempting to get vengeance. In that confrontation, Krindar learned that his sister was actually alive and what she was up to. This resulted in an entire adventure kicking off to resolve that element from his backstory. Krindar kind of got turned to stone at one point in the game, so we never really got to finish that, but it was leading somewhere interesting. Another example of a character story arc was Kasim, also from my Ancient Dragon campaign. This is the campaign I run for my patrons, by the way. Now, Kasim was estranged from his family, and his father basically disowned him and kicked him out of the house. Years later, when he was adventuring with the current group, his sister tracked him down and told him about a problem that their family business was having. She also mentioned that father's health was failing, and it might be his last chance to talk to father and possibly make amends with their relationship. So the group had to wrap up a current adventure that was very, very important for them to go on, and then they went off down south to to start on this character adventure arc, character story arc. You know what I'm talking about. So then Kasim and the entire group of adventurers got to help Kasim's family, and Kasim had a chance to make amends with his father. And Kasim didn't die or get turned to stone before this kind of resolved itself, so they actually got to play through it, and that was nice. Somebody's like, Luke, why don't you just stop killing the characters all the time so they get a chance to experience all these things? Yeah, I've made videos about that before. You should go look at some of those. If you're finding this video helpful, please give me a thumbs up and leave a comment for the algorithm down below. Let YouTube know that I don't suck and that fried rutabaga is delicious. Somebody's right now Googling what is rutabaga. It is one of the primary ingredients in pasties, which is a Michigan delicacy. Now I'm hungry. I think there are two big advantages of using character story arcs in your games instead of trying to take things from backstories and cram them into the main campaign story arc. The first one is that it's just simply less work to make a character story arc than try to cram stuff from their backstories into the main campaign story arc. It's just easier to implement. The second thing is that it gives you a break from the main campaign story arc. Like, every so often, you just get tired of doing the same thing, fighting the same villains. And so character story arcs offer you the opportunity as the dungeon master to design different adventures, and your players to go on different adventures. It's a change of scenery. It makes things more interesting, perhaps. And you can always get back to your main campaign story arc when you get done with the character story arc. Usually. Because sometimes things go way off. into the weeds and you never quite get back to what you were originally doing. I mean, it happens. It happens. By the way, I do have 2 older videos on my channel called Campaign Creation Part 1 and Campaign Creation Part 2. And they are both a deep dive into this idea of having a main campaign story arc and a character story arc. It delves into details, and the second one, Part 2, literally we walk through and give you an example of how to design a campaign with both of those elements in it. There's probably a link somewhere for you. How to implement character story arcs. Implementing them isn't that big of a deal, and I kind of already talked about it a little bit, but basically you just have your main campaign story arc with all the different adventures associated with it, and then every so often you introduce a plot hook for a character story arc, an entire adventure perhaps, or maybe just an encounter that's based on a character backstory. And then your players have the option to, instead of going and continuing things on the main campaign story arc, they could do something instead from one of the plot hooks from a character story arc. And I recommend giving them the choice. Present plot hooks. Don't like fish hook them and drag them in one certain way. But a lot of times what you're gonna find is that when you present a plot hook that is based on a backstory, that player's character is going to want to go do that thing. Now you can do this with both homebrew campaigns that you're running and modules that you're running. There's really literally no difference in how to implement those things. Now obviously if you're running a module, anytime they go off onto a character story arc, you're going to have to homebrew that adventure. Like there's no module written that will account for those things. One thing I would caution you against and suggest doing if you are running a module is ask your players if they would like to see character story arcs. They're probably gonna say yes, they're probably going to enjoy that, but there's also a chance that they are going to say, no, we signed up to play Curse of Strahd, we really just want to play Curse of Strahd, and that's fine too. So ask your players. So the next question is going to be, how frequently should you implement character story arcs alongside the main campaign story arc? There's really no set rule to this, it's mostly to your tastes and your players' tastes. I personally like to have a cadence where we go on maybe 2 main campaign story arcs, advance that adventure along a little bit, that module if you're playing a module, and then after 2 of those we have a character story arc. And then we go back to playing the module or the main campaign story arc. And again, this is not a set rule, this is a personal preference, and sometimes it goes that way and sometimes it goes completely differently. For instance, in my Ancient Dragon campaign, it has gone completely off the rails right now. We were on a main campaign story arc that had to do with fey creatures that were making deals with devils, and there were demons coming into Waterdeep. There was this whole thing going on. The players went south to to help with Kasim's family that I mentioned before. They took care of that situation, and then they learned about a domain of dread. This is a homebrew domain of dread called the Dark Shards, and they needed to go there for X, Y, and Z reasons. They went there, they entered, and now they don't want to leave. You see, they've discovered that in the Domain of Dread, there's a whole bunch of people that are essentially slaves and suffering, and there's obviously a deep, dark overlord and all of her children that are ruling with iron fists. And my players want to stay there and kill every last one of those bad guys. So yeah, we're off the rails, completely off the rails, and it's kind of fun. Maybe someday we'll get back to Waterdeep and take care of those pesky demons. Now you might be asking yourself, how exactly do I incorporate the character's backstory? Like, in other words, should I talk with the player and say, hey, I'm thinking of pulling this thing into the game and I might do this, that, or the other. What do you think? Is there another way that we might pull this thing from your backstory into the game? And you might think of collaborating with your player so that you both together can decide how to pull that game element from their backstory into the game. And I would say, don't do that. Somebody might think that it's a clever, interesting idea, you know, getting them involved in creating the campaign and all this kind of stuff. But it's really just going to completely ruin the suspense, the mystery, any surprise that they might have. Half of the fun of seeing something from your backstory turn up in the game is that you don't see it coming. You have no idea that the Dungeon Master is going to do that thing. And then out of nowhere, it's coming alive before your eyes. So if you're conspiring with and collaborating with the player about their backstory and bringing stuff in, you lose all of that. Another implementation detail that I failed to mention is that you want to rotate the different characters' backstories as well. Like, you're gonna go on your main campaign story arc, a couple adventures here, and then an adventure based upon one of the player characters' backstories. And then the next time it's around to a character story arc, you're going to take somebody else's backstory and have something happen there. And you just kind of go around rotating, giving all of the player characters their chance. And you're gonna find that some backstories are gonna have more hooks in there, more things you could pull out and turn into things for the game, and others will have fewer things. If you run out, if there's nothing you can pull from a backstory and you're just totally getting lost, just ask your players if they'd be willing to expand on their backstories more. Ask them pointed questions, ask them about X, Y, and Z, and see if you can get them to give you more information that will give you more material to work with when you're trying to see what you might use from their backstory in the game. I do have a plan on creating another video at some point that gives a little bit more information about how to take things from players' backstories and turn them into specific adventures and things like that. Because there is a method, perhaps, or methodology for doing that I want to share with you. But that's gonna have to be a different video because I'm looking at my timestamps right now and we're getting kind of long. How to get players to create backstories. Some of you throughout this whole video have just been like, Luke, that's great. That's great, Luke. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Luke. But my players don't even make backstories. So how in the world do you think that I'm gonna take something out of their backstory and turn it into a character story arc if they don't even write backstories for me? Calm down, dude. It's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay. The thing is that some players may not even know where to start when you ask for a backstory. If they're a new player, they might be clueless and lost. I have several new players in my Youngling campaign right now, and if I were to ask them to create backstories, they would give me blank stares. I think the trick is to make it easy for your players to create backstories and to give them a framework for building their backstory. For instance, I have 9 questions that I ask my players that help establish their backstory and give me the information I need to build character story arcs. I'm not gonna go over the 9 questions right here, but if you're interested, you can get them in my RPG backstory template. It is free on the DM Lair store, where you can also get lots of other Dungeon Master resources if you want. 5e adventures, digital maps, back issues of Lair magazine. We got a whole bunch of cool stuff out there for you. But the RPG backstory template with those 9 questions is 100% free. Go out, grab it, use it in your games. It's gonna make things easier for you. Click on the screen now to watch my campaign creation part 1 video, or to back the Lairs and Legends Kickstarter. And until next time, fried rutabaga for the win.